From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on February 27th, 2026 from South Carolina Public Radio studios here in Columbia. On this episode of The Lede, we recap Week 7 of the legislative session, including action on bills dealing with personal income tax reductions, the 10 Commandments, hemp-derived consumables, redistricting, and NIL deals. Lieutenant Governor Pam Evette dropped a new campaign ad touting the endorsement of her boss, Governor Henry McMaster, who she is running to replace. We hear from Winthrop University political science professor Dr. Scott Huffmon about endorsements, the race, and other big ones we're watching. And we have a new debate scheduled for you and your calendars. Also, check out the State House Gavel at scetv.org/thegavel, where Tuesday through Friday, Maayan Schechter and myself bring you recaps, previews, big and small State House moments, meeting schedule highlights, photos, videos, and more. We'll have some of that on the pod and maybe in this pod. We also want you on this pod. We don't have a wind down section today because AT is out sick. Everyone's sick. It's okay. But give him something to come back to, guys. 803-563-7169. We're thinking of you, AT. Let AT know that you're thinking about him, guys. 803-563-7169. He's a busy papa right now. Okay, let's recap Week 7 at the State House. One big thing for your pocketbooks is H 4216. That's the income tax reduction bill that was passed by the House last year and cleared the Senate on Tuesday with a catch. This bill originally would lower the top rate from 6% to 5.39% for folks like you and me. But in the final third reading of the bill, it was amended by Spartanburg Senator Lee Bright with the blessing of Finance Committee Chairman Harvey Peeler to drop that rate even further to 5.21%. You're saying that's great, Gavin. Less taxes, great, cool, neat. Well, that comes with a cost because it's offset by the recurring funds in the budget. So this more than doubles the cost of the bill to $309 million annually. And like we said, this comes from recurring dollars in the budget, pretty limited. It's not like those one-time dollars, which we have more than $1 billion of. These are the recurring dollars, and that hasn't been accounted for in the House budget that is set for debate in 2 weeks. Then you add in the additional $248 million for the expanded homestead exemption bill that passed earlier, and that ties up more than $500 million of recurring money when there's around $730 million recurring. And there are other proposed commitments for that money, including teacher pay raises, state employee pay raises, and more, things that need to come out of the recurring budget. So we're told the House will concur with this measure, which means the Senate will absolutely be chewing up the House budget when it gets to it in March. So we'll see. Going on to the 10 Commandments, the Republican-controlled House passed legislation by an 84-31 vote, which was mostly along party lines, but a little bipartisan crossover, that would require an at least 11 by 14-inch poster of the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every K-12 public school and college classroom no later than next January. Representative Stephen Long, a Republican from Spartanburg, sponsored the legislation, H 4762, that seeks to align South Carolina with a law that the state of Louisiana has passed. Now, last week, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed a June decision from a 3-judge panel that determined Louisiana's 2024 law was plainly unconstitutional, and it upheld a preliminary injunction blocking enforcement of the law. The appeals court ruling lifts that injunction and lets Louisiana require schools to display the document in each class. So that's where we are in terms of constitutionality and how some other courts have been ruling. It's kind of hit or miss here depending on what circuit you're in. But under Long's bill, the language mentions other historical documents that can also be displayed, like the Emancipation Proclamation, the Declaration of Independence, and the Mayflower Compact, as well as the Northwest Ordinance. Those can be displayed. 10 Commandments have to be displayed. Also, the bill allows school districts and charter schools to have volunteer school chaplains who must meet background checks and require parents' written consent for their child to participate. So a little bit of everything in this bill. Now, Democrats, as you know, make up 36 of the chamber's 124 seats, a superminority, and they tried unsuccessfully to further tweak that bill. Proponents for the bill said this language is in line with what Louisiana passed, so they want to keep it as similar to that, especially since there's going to be a future court case, no doubt. And, on Wednesday, things get a little sporty. And this Wednesday was no different. We had Representative David Weeks, who's a Sumter Democrat, a lawyer, church deacon, and school teacher, who tried 3 times to amend the bill to include the Golden Rule language. Take a listen to his first proposition.
In the Bible, Jesus was asked a question about amendments. And he did not choose any of the 10 commandments. He said the greatest commandment is to love your God. And the second part of it is to love your neighbors as yourselves. So I think that we could substitute the 10 commandments with this phraseology. You must love your God with all your heart. That's your God. That does not necessarily designate the Judeo-Christian God, which certainly helps the situation for those who have issues with it. And with all your heart. And then it says, the first and greatest commandment, the second is likened to it, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, don't you think that that completes the whole spirit of what we are trying to do today? So why don't we just do what Jesus did, adopt what Jesus said, tell Louisiana be damned. This is South Carolina, and we're going to stand with Jesus. And if you really believe that, you will vote for this amendment. And I really hope, Mr. Long, that you don't get up and try to tell us that you want to get rid of the Jesus amendment. I hope not. I want you to stand with Jesus too. Because if you get up and say you want to table this amendment, you want to table Jesus. I know you don't want to do that. I move for passage, Mr. Speaker.
Well, now what do you think happened next? It was tabled. Now, Representative Long did not care for Weeks' approach. Take a listen.
And I'll go ahead and say at the outset, I don't plan on taking questions. What I want to say is I don't appreciate people mocking my faith. I don't appreciate people questioning the integrity of my Christian faith and being a follower of Christ through this legislative process. I think that the bill is very important. I think it's an amendment that we can talk about on the merits, but that doesn't mean that you get to come in here and question my faith on this bill and in the amendments that are discussed here. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will move to table at the appropriate time.
Weeks came back up to the well again for his final amendment and apologized if anyone took offense to his prior comments.
And that's the only thing I'm asking you to do, is to add this provision to it so that we can, again, teach our young folk that this is a part of the foundation of which this great nation was established. But it also has a biblical heritage that is also a part of the heritage of this great nation. And so I'm asking that you add this to the display and let the young folk know that not only are we serious about loving each other, but we're also serious about respecting each other. I do apologize if I insulted anybody's religion in the comments that I have made today, but I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I might as well let you know I stand for what I stand for. And so, Mr. Speaker, along that line, I move for passage of this amendment.
Later on in the debate, Representative Justin Bamberg, who's a Democrat from Bamberg, gave his colleagues roughly a 10-minute silent treatment. That's because during cloture, you only have 10 minutes as a representative to speak for or against the bill. That's how it's broken down in the 2 hours that they're given to speak for and against the bill. Everyone gets 10 minutes if they want to talk. And he spent that time standing silently with a sign that read, "Cloture, Silence, Christian Voices." And attached to that printed sign was Exodus chapter 14, verse 14, that said, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And like we said, that bill passed and it's over to the Senate now. Also this week, we followed some other bills, including on redistricting, which was a bit of a futile effort on redistricting this week that ended in no action as proponents sought to make the 6th congressional district, the state's only Democratic district, more competitive, while maintaining the state's 6 other congressional districts as solidly Republican. Now, proponents argue that Republican voters in the 6th district have been left without a voice for decades under Congressman Jim Clyburn. State Representative Justin Bamberg, again, who sat on the House's ad hoc redistricting committee, posed this question to Dorchester County GOP Chairman C.J. Westfall.
What do I tell Democrats in other parts of the state who feel as though the other congressional districts are gerrymandered or drawn in such a way that a Democrat could never win? What are we supposed to tell them?
I think that's a good faith question, so I really actually appreciate that. I think that elections have consequences, Justin. The reality that we live in is that the voters in this state have chosen to give us a supermajority on the Republican side. It's up to us to decide what we do with it, and it's up to Democrats to go change hearts and minds. It's not that long ago that Democrats did have statewide control of South Carolina, and voters decided to choose a different party. So I would say elections have consequences. To your point, it would make the current maps would make some of these districts that are plus 16R, plus 10R. So I would argue that some of them would be slightly more competitive, but I would argue that those folks should go out and work to change hearts and minds. None of them in this district, in this map, from what I understand, would be a plus 22, which is by how many points that Duke Buckner lost by with Jim Clyburn. And I'd also argue that this is something, Representative Bamberg, that you should champion. In the 6th Congressional District, not only have you guys not had a choice between a Republican and Democrat, you haven't had a viable Democrat challenger be allowed to run against Representative Clyburn. And a lot of folks in this room know why. That machine will run you right off and try to end your career. So we're looking for competition. I think those folks should go out and try to win hearts and minds. That would be my answer.
Well, I would say that I disagree that folks couldn't run. Folks can run if they want. And there are a lot of Democrats that do actually respect, appreciate Congressman Clyburn, and you do have some who will say, oh, well, he's been there for too long. However, they're willing to acknowledge the seniority that he has in Congress and view that as a good thing versus a bad thing, right? Sure. If we're being fair.
That was Representative Justin Bamberg and Dorchester County GOP Chairman C.J. Westfall. Now, that bill, like we said, isn't going anywhere, not to mention that filing opens for the 2026 election in 2 weeks, and the primaries are in June. So changing up the maps for the congressional districts would be impossible, I think it's safe to say, let alone they'd be challenged in court, no doubt. But some other bills we're watching to update you on. A Senate Education Subcommittee slightly amended and moved the House-approved so-called bathroom bill to the full Senate Education Committee in a 3-2 party line vote. The bill, H. 4756, which is sponsored by York Republican Representative Tommy Pope, requires a person at a K-12 public school and public colleges and universities and their facilities to use a restroom, changing facility, or locker room, or an overnight dorm that corresponds with their biological sex at birth. The House included a provision that all school buildings must have at least one single-user restroom and changing facility. So it's going through the committee process in the Senate, along with what we saw in the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, which voted to advance the hemp-derived consumable regulation bill, H. 3924, sponsored by Representative Chris Wooten, who's a Republican from Lexington. That bill would define consumable hemp products, regulate sales of hemp-derived consumables to stores with valid alcohol licenses, and prohibit sales and consumption to anyone under 21. That bill is now on the Senate calendar, and it could likely be the vehicle for anything hemp-related. We were expecting another hemp debate on Wednesday, but that 10 Commandments debate ran long in the House, so stay tuned. And the NIL bill, or Name, Image, and Likeness bill, H. 4902. Now, we were in a bit of a holding pattern over this bill that was quickly pushed through the House last year with no hearings, and the Senate last week voted 30-13 to approve the legislation on second reading. That would join South Carolina with other states by sealing public records of name, image, and likeness and revenue-sharing contracts between student athletes and teams with colleges and universities. Now, you had folks like Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey and Finance Chair Peeler and others vote against this measure. Now, the second reading vote on a bill is the big vote, but third reading is given and usually approved the next day as a perfunctory measure based off of that second reading vote. You know where things are, they're not supposed to really change. Not the case here. There was a hearing with several athletic directors this week to get assurances that no public money is involved in these deals. While it's been said that there is no public money involved, it's still not clear, and such legislation would make it even less so. Now, that bill did get third reading by voice vote on Thursday, and it now heads to the governor's desk. Let's head on to the campaign trail. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette dropped a new statewide digital and broadcast ad touting her endorsement of the man that brought her to the dance back in 2018, Governor Henry McMaster. We covered that endorsement in previous pods, but take a listen to this spot.
In other warriors, your Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette.
Bringing President Trump's agenda to South Carolina, Pamela Evette.
Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. She's fantastic.
Banning sanctuary cities, defending life and the Second Amendment, protecting women's sports, and now endorsed by Governor Henry McMaster.
We keep winning with Pamela Evette as our next governor.
Business leader, America First Conservative, Pamela Evette for governor.
Your Lieutenant Governor is going places. You do know that, right?
The day of that endorsement from McMaster, we did see Attorney General Alan Wilson's campaign drop its first ad of the cycle, titled Courage. Expect to start seeing and hearing more of these, as well as mailers. It's coming, folks. Now, I did talk recently with Winthrop University political science professor Dr. Scott Huffmon about this endorsement, a potential Trump endorsement, the first congressional district race, and Senator Lindsey Graham's race. I started off by asking Huffmon about the McMaster endorsement and just how important these things are overall.
Well, endorsements have evolved over time. They really didn't matter that much, certainly not, an endorsement from a newspaper or something like that. But one of the important things about endorsements is it's a big deal if you don't get certain endorsements, if certain politicians stay neutral or don't get involved. And if Pamela Evette had not gotten Henry McMaster's endorsement, or if McMaster had decided to sit it out, that really would have affected her campaign, because she has spent a lot of money raising her name recognition up to that of Nancy Mace and Alan Wilson. Now, I don't want her campaign folks to get upset, but the truth is most people in most states can't name their lieutenant governor. That's not going to be true for the political activists that go to the party meetings. They're going to be able to name their lieutenant governor. But she had to spend a lot of money just to get up to the level of name recognition. But that also helped her get a lot of potential votes. But undecided, still number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of what I want to talk about too. When we talk about polling, I know it's still somewhat early. We haven't seen too much good polling, and it seems like Evette, Attorney General Wilson, and Congresswoman Nancy Mace are jockeying and kind of going back and forth among those top three spots. But again, the unknowns is it's still sitting around 30%. So, I mean, it's still kind of anyone's race at this point, it seems like.
Well, we did a poll a while back when we were just testing name recognition, and an overwhelming majority of Republicans said an endorsement from Trump would carry a whole lot of weight. Well, McMaster, of course, is a favorite of Trump. He was the first statewide elected official to endorse Trump the first time around. And of course, we know how Trump helped him become governor. So we're not sure if we can say an endorsement from McMaster is almost as good as silver compared to a gold for Evette, and if it's a first step to an endorsement from Trump, but it means a lot. And so the polling that we're going to see after that endorsement is going to tell us how much weight McMaster carries among the potential voters.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, even at that point, like you're talking about the polling you did for the Trump endorsement, how much that could weigh. I mean, do you think at that point, if we were to see Trump endorse and then possibly come down here and do some campaigning or a rally for her, I mean, if it is Pam Evette, I mean, would that just be race defining? Would that be race ending for some folks, in your opinion?
Well, it could be race ending because, we talk about the top three, but of course it's not just the top three in the race. It would certainly redefine the race. It would begin to question how important is Trump's endorsement in this day and age. And nationally, it's not quite the platinum standard that it was previously as we approach the 2026 midterms. That's nationally. This is South Carolina. And South Carolina Republicans love Donald Trump to the tune of 90% plus approval ratings among Republicans. But here's the thing. I did a little math. I talked to somebody who regularly attends a Republican county party meeting in a populous state, and they said on average 60 or so people show up. So you do the math with 70 or so people, you get 3,200 really hardcore activists. Well, more than 100 times that are going to vote in this statewide primary. And I'm lowballing it because it'll actually probably be over 400,000. So the things that really hit the hardcore activists might not hit with the strong Republicans who just aren't quite as hardcore. So we're going to see some evolution and jockeying in this race as more and more undecideds get good looks at the candidates. And remember, Ralph Norman hasn't unleashed his campaign chest yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have been seeing some folks pivoting around and really getting a little bit tougher, especially when it comes to Pam Evette, who's defining herself in many ways, too, for folks who, like you said, are still learning about her, even though she's traveled the state, spent a lot of time traveling the state, but also spending that money on campaign ads to introduce herself to many people.
Yeah. And, again, that's what she had to do. It's, looking back at congressional races, there was a lot of research done on how many dollars were spent per vote. And when you had an incumbent who already had name recognition, every dollar spent was an additional vote. Whereas for a challenger, every dollar spent for the first 2/3 of the election just got name recognition before it started winning votes. So that really has been true for every race when you have a candidate who doesn't have the name recognition of others. But of course, this is a wide open race. And we know from Nikki Haley's primary that amazing things can happen. And that is an example of when an endorsement fundamentally changed the race.
Yeah, talk about Sarah Palin right there back in that 2010 race. And then, of course, we're also seeing ads come into play because we've seen some fundraising going on, too. We've seen that Attorney General Wilson's already dropped his first ad. That came the day of the McMaster endorsement, coincidentally enough. But it's also, Wilson's also the first person to announce his running mate, and that came out in mid-January, which kind of coincided again with the fourth quarter fundraising numbers that we saw him lagging behind Evette and May. So that being said, what do you make of his move already coming out of the gate with his announcement to have a running mate with State Senator Mike Rickenbach from Florence?
Well, again, it's a way to set an anchor and say, I'm, getting someone from this area. I'm, making moves. It's a way to control the narrative about you as well. Alan Wilson, the narrative around him has very much been defined by Nancy Mace's attacks on him. And this is one way, making proactive moves that he can reclaim the narrative. And he's going to have to continue to do that because I don't see attacks against him abating anytime soon. His family name is so well known. He's going to be a primary target. And that includes, I think, when Ralph Norman really gets in the race. So it's a way of taking back the narrative when you make announcements in the way Alan Wilson has.
And Scott, pivoting to the first congressional district race, which is, I guess, probably the most competitive congressional race we have, obviously, up there in the 5th district for Norman's seat. Wes Clymer, the state senator, is doing kind of has it on lock, it seems like. But the first congressional district is drawing national attention now with the DCCC saying that it's a competitive race. It's one of their target races, even though 57% of the vote in that district went for Trump in 2024 and has been redrawn more conservatively since Democrat Joe Cunningham won there in 2018 and then lost to Nancy Mace in 2020. So what do you make of that call from the DCCC, even though Cook Political Report, again, continues to say this is a solid Republican district? Is that just giving some of those candidates wide open on both sides, but those Democrats some hope here?
Well, it's still a strong Republican leaning. Again, like you said, the Cook Political Report puts in solid Republican. Even if it goes into lean Republican, it's still almost certainly going to go Republican. But to your point, when the DCCC starts unleashing its money, it's going to look at races, for example, in Texas, that, Texas tried to gerrymander to make sure that, they had even more Republican races. Well, there are surprising challengers on the Democratic side for some of those races. And the DCCC is going to say, hey, we might win this race that last year we thought we had no chance in. To the degree they start spending their money around the country in races like that, races like we see in the 1st congressional district that have been, since redistricting, solid R, the Democrats are going to get less and less money.
Mm-hmm. And then just kind of wrapping up with the Senate race with Senator Graham. He's been making a lot of big waves recently. I don't know if you saw him in the Oval Office when he was with Trump and talking about immigration and cracking down on sanctuary cities. And then immediately that week, the same week, I saw that a news clip in a campaign ad for him. He's really pressing the field here. He has the most money in that race. He does have some primary challengers, but it seems like he's also really becoming more animated, a little bit more aggressive out there too. Even with world leaders, he was at the Munich Security Conference recently, and behind closed doors had some choice words for leaders, and that got out. And I'm wondering if you think that this is part of like the Graham campaign cycle where he's really showing his loyalty to Trump, making sure folks know that behind closed doors and in front of cameras, he's all about Trump, even though you hear folks like Chris Christie on Bill Maher talking about how he might say something different, in a green room before going on camera and saying something different live. I mean, what do you think of Graham? I mean, we've seen him run now. He's running for his 5th term. How do you mesh this campaign cycle, Graham?
Very few candidates in modern history have been able to hoist their sails and catch the political winds of the day in the way Lindsey Graham has. He knows which way the wind blows. He knows, where his bread is buttered, whatever metaphor you want to use. And he does change how he approaches politics, how he's seen, depending on what matters at the time. In South Carolina, of course, he had approval ratings that were, pretty high among Republicans, but nowhere near the heights of Tim Scott and Henry McMaster, much less Trump. So when he needed to raise his approval ratings, we saw him become an attack dog for the Kavanaugh hearings. And that was not the Lindsey Graham people were used to seeing. And shockingly, his approval ratings among Republicans in South Carolina skyrocketed after that. So showing a different side of himself, especially during the Trump era, to be an attack dog for Donald Trump, making sure he is photographed at Donald Trump's side, making sure to reach out to the MAGA base with pictures of him with Donald Trump and that endorsement, that's important for his race.
And mark your calendars. The state GOP is holding gubernatorial debates in partnership with Gray Media. All these debates will be carried on Gray Media stations, including on April 1st from the Newberry Opera House, April 21st from the College of Charleston, May 26th from Wofford College in Spartanburg, and June 16th at Coastal Carolina University for a runoff if needed. It's unclear who has confirmed for these debates yet or if everyone's going to be a part of these debates. There's also been some kerfuffles over sponsorship deals and paying, a lot of back and forth here. But there may be other debates offered by other entities as well, so stay tuned as we cover all those that we can. Thanks for listening to the pod, y'all. Show us your appreciation by leaving us a review or a voicemail at 803-563-7169. And you can stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. I had some sad turkey slop. Everything I have is sad. But it had peppers, so that made it more fun, and rice. It's going to the end. AT's still not here, but Sean knows how to play this game.